So my name's Disa. I am part of the CME department here. I do medical education. I'm also a nurse, and I'm also a mom, which is probably it is my biggest job. And so we talked about our reactions. Everyone's initial reaction is it's heartbreaking. It's a reality of many rare disease families. In the United States, a condition that affects less than 200,000 people, approximately 30 million Americans, is defined as a rare disease. About half of those affect children, and of those half, about 30% are life-limiting. And the majority thought to be genetic, and as she mentioned over there on the side, 95% do not have an FDA-approved treatment. My other reaction, the very first time I watched this, which was at work because they gave me the screening so we could decide if we want to do this, was a flood of different emotions: validation, glee. I was so excited in a way that somebody had the experience. Mine isn't as extreme, luckily, but the same experience that I had, getting the diagnosis, finding the path, all of those. And that's why the beginning of her film was really the most emotional for me, because it brought me back to that finding out you have a child with a rare disease. So this is Amelia. I put as many pictures as I could in. She was born in 2019 in the summer, and she had throughout her childhood little bits and bits of little conditions or little symptoms that were concerning, not all together extremely concerning, but as they grew. So, she ended up needing surgery. Of course, she was born right before COVID. The biggest thing was a big speech regression after she was just after her third birthday. She went from trying sentences, trying to repeat about anything you want to say, her to say, to almost nothing. She went down to 4 words, and she was stuck there for about a year. Oh, speech regression. Yep, that's a big one. And I think that's what I find is a symptom that most people come to the first with a neurodevelopmental disease, at least, where that's the aha moment. We eventually got her an AAC, and then she started having the flapping arms with excitement. And coming from healthcare also, I was like, oh, okay, this could be autism. Her doctor was not convinced. Her pediatrician, she had good eye contact. She was very personable. She was almost affectionate to an extreme to anybody, strangers, people. So we got a new pediatrician and a neurodevelopmental specialist referral. That was an 8-month wait. And then we finally were diagnosed with autism level 2, global development delay, small stature, speech delay, and a genetic test, which was standard for the practitioner. So I got the result. I just logged in the portal one day about a month after the disease, or after we sent in the swab, and oh, there's a result there. So you can just go and see it yourself. So I opened the result. It's the ZMYND11 related intellectual disability, a de novo, meaning it's not inherited, pathogenic variant with lots of numbers and letters on the ZMYND11 gene on chromosome 10. And reading the report, those symptoms on the top were the ones she was already displaying, and the green ones are those that can be associated with a disorder. And those on the bottom were the purple ones are ones that she had, but we didn't really recognize until it was pointed out. And then those 2 orange ones, the seizure and intellectual disability, ones that we weren't quite sure about yet. So in healthcare, we get a new diagnosis. The expectation is you go to the doctor. You say, what does this mean? Can you explain it to me? So what does this mean for Amelia's overall health? What's the treatment options? What's the management? What's going to be the follow-up plan? And because of who I am, both as a nurse and really liking to be very well informed, I searched the internet. I found the 3 articles available out there that were specific to this gene disorder, and the 1-page front and back education handout. And I'm like, okay, this is a little scary. I saw, a young adult who could barely walk, and somebody else that had seizures, unresponsive to epileptic medication. So I was a little scared to the point I didn't even tell my husband I got the result until I went to the doctor, because I was hoping she could give me a little more information that wasn't going to freak him out. So this is probably very similar to the face that I made when I went to the doctor, and they had the same stack of papers and nothing more. They had read all the same literature as I did. That was it. So for Amelia, from her first real concerning symptoms to diagnosis was about 20 months. And that's actually pretty good for rare disease. Average diagnosis is 6 to 10 years. And if we have extra time, you can ask me about 36.5 years. So what do you do then? Let's see. For about 4 months, we did what we could. We added her to all the wait lists for all the therapies that we were given, a handful of them. We told her daycare, her special education preschool team that she was already in, our friends and our family about what to watch for, what symptoms could develop. We joined the social media group for the ZMYND11 gene disorders, which was about 50 people that represented about 20 to 30 individuals with a disorder. And we heard a lot of things that really aren't very helpful. Like, she's so lucky to have you, Mom, with your skill. You can't really tell. There are a lot of late talkers. So-and-so had similar symptoms and they're fine. I understand it's supposed to be helpful, but it just isn't really. Oops. And so not all therapies have to be gene therapy. For Willow, it did. I recognize that that's extremely expensive, extremely rare, and also I personally think that gene therapy should at this point be set aside for degenerative diseases that are going to be life-limiting, that can't just be managed with their symptoms. So this is a drug repurposing screen, kind of like the best idea of a visual I could get, where take the genetic matter, you add it to some kind of medium, you test it against thousands of FDA-approved drugs that are already out there, and you discover if any of them look like they might improve the function of the gene. So a lot of times mutation it mutates, you can't read the rest of that gene, and this is from my very layperson explanation of it. And so whatever the functions are on the rest of that gene, that's going to be where your symptoms are. So this is actually a different advocacy group that just started clinical trials on a drug repurposed screen. Those top right ones are probably the hits they decided, like, these look like they're a good possibility. They're already an FDA approved drug. Let's give them to the patients. Let's monitor them. Let's see if it improves. And they have done amazing things with stuff like this. So where are we now? So I took 4 months and kind of pondered it, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to do something more. I searched the internet again, and I found on a rare disease site a public benefit corporation that will contract with families to help you discover your own treatment, help walk you through the process. So we established a nonprofit underneath a fiscal sponsor. We started fundraising. We created a website. We created a public Facebook page for our supporters. We did a whole lot of awareness information. We did some fundraising, and we fell really short of our goal because we've discovered that a lot of people need money. And it's also really hard to fundraise when you don't have a location. So our people are approximately maybe 80 to 100 individuals now, because it's really escalating in 12 different countries. So you can't really go to your local mom and pop and say, "Do you want to run a fundraiser for my one person and 90 people around the world?" So that's a little difficult. So what do we do now? So it was going to be a really long path, hopefully, in fundraising, and we decided that was not going to work. So we connected with a lab that was already studying this gene as in its relationship to seizures, and we gave them all of our genetic reports. They recently published a study saying it was probably a strong association with this disorder to autism diagnosis. It's probably going to be a more common diagnosis that results in autism, and that it was their preliminary research shows it was very susceptible to medication treatment. So we're like excited about that. That's great. And then, and so we used a third of our fundraising because we knew we weren't going to get anywhere there, a third of our fundraising to pay this company to develop a grant application to do a drug repurposing screen through the research lab. And any remaining money from that grant, they were going to be allowed to use for autism research in general. So we thought it's a win-win. So that was supposed to be submitted on January 1st of this year. And for most rare disease, the commercialization plan in a grant is the PRV, the Priority Review Voucher, which was at the last ditch changes to the funding bill in Congress last fall, removed the PRV voucher, which a lot of people were really shocked at. Everyone was very confident it was going to come back right after the new year, that it was an accident. Nobody realized they were eliminating it, but they did. So our grant needed a new commercialization plan. So, you know, our long path became a mountain. And then we set a new goal for April 1st of this year. Except now, NIH grants, especially related to autism, are kind of, I don't know if they're going to come back. So we're kind of upside down rock climbing at this point. So how does this affect the Alaskan community? I did a lot of this research last year for Rare Disease Day and didn't find much newer information. So between 2008 and 2019, children population in Alaska decreased by 950. Those with disabilities increased by 241. And in the Anchorage School District, in a four-year enrollment decreased by 9.5%. We all know it's been going down. But at the same time, the enrollment in special education decreased by 7.5%. So proportionally, the amount of children with special needs in schools is getting larger. So for children and youth with special health care needs in Alaska, this is from 2016-2017, 28.1 had one or more unmet need for a specific healthcare need or service. 1 in 4 had a problem getting a specialty care referral, and 12% of families spent 11 hours or more weekly providing or coordinating health care to their children, which sounds absolutely accurate. So for families, this means a lot of wait lists. When your therapy schedule, when you come to the top of the list, you have to take whatever's available. If it's Tuesdays at 10 a.m., you have to take it. So very scattered schedules. So I reached out to a local resource company and I said, hey, my husband and I both work. This is really tricky. And at this point, the daycare was starting to tell us they can't handle our daughter anymore. She's too much work for them. So I said, is there a trick? Is there something I haven't figured out for keeping this? Like, is there a statewide scheduler where you get to communicate with other families to barter on time slots? And what she told me was the hard reality is that you probably will have to stop working at some point. So this does impact society. It takes parents away from the workforce. I've been very fortunate in FMLA and accommodating workplace, but that can be really hard to come by. And recently my husband did take an early retirement, so he is now taking care of the kids so that I can work and we don't have to leave at lunch and move a kid from one place to another and coordinate everything. So as of November 22, this is a graph showing the amount of genetic tests from 2012 to 2022. Only 165 of these, it says, were for research purposes. So the amount of testing is drastically increasing. It's becoming a lot easier. We did ours, cheek swab, through the mail. Good question. I think it's probably a combination of, I think it reflects people that are symptomatic of some sort. Now, whether it's the doctors putting it in or the families paying for their own test, I'm not sure. But I definitely know that genetic testing is increasing. People are becoming more open to it also. So my question at some point wouldn't improving the health and well-being of individuals with rare genetic diseases be overall better on individuals, families, communities, and society than just helping them manage their symptoms? Kind of what Maggie was saying. So let's talk money. Interesting, you should point out that chart. That also made a big impact when I was watching the movie. I reached out to Amber. I asked her how did she continue doing it. She didn't because they were on TRICARE and they don't get individual evidence of benefits, so she couldn't keep track of the exact money. But mine is not. So I'm on Federal Blue Cross Blue Shield through my husband, and Amelia, because she has an intellectual disability, is eligible for Medicaid through TEFRA. So this is just the year 2024. So you'll see all the therapies down there. On the left is how much in 2024 was paid for by Blue Cross Blue Shield, and on the right is the federal funding. And the very far right, that HIPP, does anyone know what that is? No, I didn't know it either. I found it on a Facebook post again. It's the health insurance premium payment. So every year at the end of the year, we submit all of our private insurance claims to the state of Alaska, Disability Services. They decide, does it make more sense for them to convince us to keep our daughter on private insurance and not just put her on Medicaid? And because they said, yep, it makes sense, we would have paid a lot of money for this girl, they then reimburse us for all of our premium payments for the whole family for the whole year. So they know. How long did it take me to get her on Medicaid? I think it took about 8 months. Yeah. So from submission to when you actually, and you have to go through, interviews. They interview a few of your therapists and teacher, and then they go through a skill scale where ask you, can she do this? Can she do this? And they decide what level of need she is. And as of this week, she's finally hit all of the therapies available through special education in the school district. At the end of the meeting, I was like, is that everything? Are we missing anything? They're like, nope, you got them all. She's doing great. She's a great kid. So yeah, let me go back here. So adds up to about 115 plus 75,000. So that's 1 year for one kid out of the estimated 80 to 100 diagnosed in the world. And we are getting 1 to 2 individuals new every week in our Facebook group. So when I say we, I'm pretty much running the organization. I do have a couple of families that are supportive. Luckily, I've taken leadership of that. So now when someone is newly diagnosed with this disorder and they call to make a follow-up appointment before they get to the genetic screening, which is usually about a month out, and for Alaskans, it's on Zoom, and it's usually somebody who doesn't know what resources you have. So now, when people get the diagnosis, they call me. So I get random phone calls from random families from Maryland, and they're like, what's going to happen? So I get to go through it with them. It's been very validating. It's been it's been really good. And luckily for our kids, there's a big spectrum. My daughter's probably right in the middle. There's kids that have it, maybe their siblings have it, and it's really not very impactful. They've got some learning disability, they maybe have some speech therapy. And then there's the kids on the far other spectrum that have daily seizures that are not responsive to medications, who have such low muscle tone that they can't hardly walk. So so my daughter's about halfway there, and I know that that's a good spot for me because, and I don't ask for a lot of help from other people. I really try to keep them involved, but mostly because I know the people who want it the most, their kids are the most work, so they don't have much time. So I'm impacted enough that I really am passionate to keep doing this, but I'm also know that I have a little bit of time more than them. So any guesses on how much the drug repurposing screen for the ZMYND11 gene disorder would be? Okay. 60,000. So 125,000. So again, like you said, 1 year of one child out of 100, and one drug would have, it's not to say that it would fix them all, but it would probably significantly reduce the symptoms. There are some other groups. One group was like high doses of B6 was their cure. Not even super expensive, just round the clock B6. Another one was micro doses of ibuprofen around the clock, not so much that it hurts your liver, but enough. And there's kids that start walking like without assistance that weren't before. So yeah, so my takeaway that I'd like you to take away is that tomorrow is Rare Disease Day. It's so rare that a lot of people don't even know about Rare Disease Day. And I ask you to highlight something about Rare Disease Day. Take it, share a fact, look up a new disease you didn't know about. And yeah, that's there's our kids, some of them, for ZMYND11. Yeah. And I know I took 10 minutes. I said 10 minutes, I'm sorry.